Testing. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. I think I know most of you, but my name is Mark Danninger, and I've had a pretty good experience in the mining industry in the last 30 years. Open pit mining, mostly in maintenance. And one of the things that I've been interested in since I grew up in Colorado in the 70s was underground mining history in the western U.S. And a couple of years ago, I was working on a presentation for our group in relation to aerial trams and chairlifts, or ski lifts. And I was cruising around the internet looking for black and white photos to put into the presentation. And I came across some really cool photos of a mine in Wyoming that had a 16-mile aerial tram. And I'm like, what? Maybe it's 1.6 miles. There's a mistake here. And I'm digging through these photos and reading up on it, and sure enough, there was such a mine. And it just blew me away. So much so that my wife Joan and I decided to take a drive down to Encampment, Wyoming last July to check this place out. And we spent all day driving our four-wheel drive on Forest Service 2-track, rough-ass roads, and then did all kinds of hiking to get to that place. And then, of course, we're like Sherlock Holmes. We're sleuthing around looking for artifacts and cool stuff. And where was the tram? Because there's big, huge trees there now, and all the towers are gone, So it took us a while to find everything. Anyway, I decided to do a presentation on this for our fellow mining history enthusiasts. The aerial tram in relation to the Ferris-Haggarty Mine also had a concentrator on the smelter at the other end of 16 miles in Encampment. So think about that. They built a smelter there. We had a smelter in Murray. We have one in Garfield. We had some in the valley. But out in the middle of Wyoming, just was a huge undertaking. So I call this operation the Copper Contender, and you'll see why as we go through the presentation. If you could please hold your questions until the end, I would appreciate it. All right, so where in Wyoming was this? Okay, here's the state. Colorado's down here. It's in the south central part of the state, okay? So you come down from I-80 to Saratoga and then to Encampment. The North Platte River comes out of Colorado and flows through here. Outstanding fly fishing for those who are into that. We have not sampled it yet, but we have plans to do that now that we discovered this place. Here's the Continental Divide, okay? Here is the Haggerty Creek drainage, okay, the watershed, okay? All right, here's a close-up. The Sierra Madre Mountains with the Continental Divide running right through here. The highway from Encampment goes down this way and goes to Baggs, Wyoming, if you're familiar with where that is. Okay. And there's a lot of private property along Haggerty Creek and the steel gate down here. Forest Service Road is closed to only to everybody except the landowners. So you have to come in the back doorway just below the Continental Divide on these rough-ass roads I was talking about. Okay? All right. Before there was a Ferris-Haggarty Mine, let's talk about the prehistory there. there was the Rudafeha mine, okay? It was a claim developed by 4 guys, and they decided to name the mine after the first 2 letters of their last name, okay? J.M. Rumsey, Robert Deal, George Ferris, and Ed Haggerty. Haggerty and Ferris were the primary forces in developing the Rudafeha mine. Haggerty was a sheep herder and a prospector from England. Ferris was his boss, and we believe he was a rancher. And Rumsey and Deal were partners with Haggerty. So you can see here this first structure of the Rudafeha mine was quite a ways up from Haggerty Creek, and then it was constructed in 1897 and operated for about 3 years. So this A-frame looking structure is actually where the head frame was for the shaft, but all this is rough-hewn logs from local timber. The waste dump was out this little trestle and down this way. All right, in 1900, as the ore body was being further developed and it was trending down slope, down towards Haggerty Creek, the mine owners decided, let's put a new shaft house somewhat below the first one, okay? So that's what this is here. And it's a little larger than what they had before. Here's the little trestle for the ore carts to go to the waste dump. And this is inside this building, okay? There's a small steam hoist here, and this is part of the head frame legs, all right? And they got a pile of ore here, and they have to manually sort it from the high grade from the low grade, all right? And they put it in burlap sacks and haul it out in wagons. All right. The development of the Ferris-Haggarty Mine. By 1899, Deal and Rumsey had departed, and Haggerty sold his shares to Ferris, at which point Ferris renamed the Rudafeha mine to the Ferris-Haggarty Mine. Some years prior, Ferris met Willis George Emerson, a newspaperman, novelist, and a promoter of the fledgling town of Encampment, Wyoming, who was connected to the east. It's always what it was. He's connected to the east. Same thing at Soul and Sparrow. He was connected to the east. That's where the money was, the investors, the movers and the shakers, right? After having studied a lot of these historical events, I get a dubious sense when I hear about, he's from the east. Nefarious. Okay. In 1899, Ferris sold the Ferris-Haggarty Mine to Emerson, backed by investors for $1 million, to the recently created North American Copper Company, in which Emerson was elected vice president. $1 million, okay, in 1899. Well, Ferris, he cut a fat hog, and him and his wife decided to build a Copper King mansion in Rawlins, Wyoming. All right? George and Julia Ferris took their newfound wealth and started construction on a 3-story, 8,000 square foot, 21-room Queen Anne mansion. Unfortunately, George passed away in a stagecoach accident near the mine in the winter of 1900. Something spooked the horses, causing the driver to lose control, sending the coach off the road. It rolled on its side with George trapped underneath. Ferris's brother and the 2 drivers survived. Now, if you go up to that mine the way we did, which is really the only way to get in there, it's along the Continental Divide, you can picture the stagecoach going off the road in the wintertime. No question about it. And it's steep on both sides. Julia continued to live in the mansion until her passing in 1931 at age 76. Now, what's interesting is this mansion is currently for sale at an outstanding price. If this was in Old Town, you can imagine, put another, put a number 4 in front of the 7. Okay? Now, for quite a few years, this was a bed and breakfast. And it's no longer that. However, it was fully restored. I encourage you to go through, look at 47 photos. This is online. You can look at the parlor room and the sitting room and the kitchen. It's just incredible. The property also comes with a carriage house, a 2-story carriage house that was converted into 4 apartments, which are currently leased. And that can generate all the income you need to keep this place running.
If you want.
Yeah, but I'm willing to overlook that because this is a cool house. All right, so unfortunately for George, he passed away and couldn't enjoy his fruits of his labor. All right, in 1902, the North American Copper Company significantly expanded the Ferris-Haggarty Mine by building a new complex along Haggerty Creek downslope from the Rudafea shafts. So the Rudafea operations were up here. You can kind of see it in this sketch, okay? So they moved everything down here. So the mine is actually, the added entrance is right here. This is the powerhouse, steam boilers, steam engines, compressors, etc. And out here was the waste dump area and a covered tramway leading to the aerial tram loading facility. Okay, there's an ore bin here, and then the tram loading's down here. The tram also had a powerhouse down here. This is the coal supply bin. So they brought in coal from 3 miles away and filled these bunkers right here. And then you can see the tram towers going up over the hill. One of many hills. All right. So now the operation is becoming a contender. Okay? A new 16-mile aerial tram to transport the ore to the new mill and smelter and encampment, the longest in the world for many decades, and the first not connected to a railroad, which was planned for a later date. We'll talk about that shortly. Compressed air locomotives were used in the Osceola Tunnel to transport ore from stopes to the aerial tram loading station. So here we go, a whole string of ore carts, miners. This is a blacksmith shop and warehouse. You can see all the mine timbers already pre-cut and stacked. Here's the wooden aerial tram towers going up the mountain. These are the old Rudafea shaft number 1, number 2 area up here. Just some prospect pits right there. So, nice day to turn out for photo. Got some kids here and spouses. All right. Everybody's looking pretty proud. Oh, and the underground photo. Okay, that's next. Here we go. The previous Rudafea shafts provided natural airflow for mine ventilation. Coal procured from a mine 3 miles away was transported to the Ferris-Haggarty Mine with wagons for the electrical plant and also loaded onto the aerial tram for transport to the smelter. All right, so here, nice square set timbering going on in the stope. You can see a air drill right here. Here's some tracks going down to a crosscut perhaps or another stope. So pretty good photo, good contrast resolution. All right, this is the the ore body. We see the Rudafea shaft 1, Rudafea shaft 2. Okay, and the Haggerty mine is over here somewhere down by the creek. But these are the workings that were mined out that we know of. Okay, the Gossan material. These are stope workings. So you got some raises, crosscuts, drifts, declines right here. All right, and it's estimated that the reserves continue down here that haven't been fully explored yet. Okay. Now, what kind of stuff are we looking at here? Okay, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? becoming a copper contender. Keep that in mind. The quality of ore from the Rue de Faya and the Ferris-Haggarty mining complex was very good. Average copper grade was 6 to 8% copper per ton. Today's open pit copper mines have less than 1% copper. Is that correct, Joan? Well, way less. I was being generous. Okay, the 1%. All right, it's actually like, what, 0.05 or 0.5? Okay. This was a bonanza. High-grade copper was between 30 and 40% copper per ton. I mean, you just pick up a chunk of rock and it's copper with 50 or 60% waste material in it, right? So no wonder he was able to sell for $1 million. Also had some lower amounts of silver and gold. So the copper ores would be the malachite, the chalcopyrite, the bornite, and the chalcocite. Okay, and then there's of course pyrite in here, which would have traces of silver and gold as well. So I don't know how well you guys can see it, but you can see that peacock color of the copper. And then the green stuff is oxidized copper. So these samples, let's see, yeah, Dan Helsel collected these from inside the mine, I think about 20 years ago. So this stuff is still in there if you go looking for it. All right. At the time, it was the 27th most significant copper mine in the U.S., producing approximately 23 million pounds of copper ore from 1897 to 1908. In 1908, the mine closed. And it was valued at $2 million throughout those years. Okay? So again, we have the malachite and the chalcocite, and then the waste rock is the serratic schist. Not shit, schist. Okay? Although the miners called it, you know what. All right, let's talk about this incredible aerial tram. And you can see the mine down here, Haggerty Creek. It went up the first ridge right here, across this huge cirque, and then continued kind of on a flat slope to the Continental Divide right here, okay? And then went down, and then turned here and went straight towards Encampment, okay? 4 sections, okay? This is the first section, 2, 3, and 4, roughly 4 miles apiece, okay? So concurrently with all the upgrades at the mine, the North American Copper Company built this 16-mile tram crossing the Continental Divide over 10,000 feet. So the elevation of the mine is about 900 feet lower than the divide, and the smelter is at about 7,200 feet. And because of multiple ups and downs, it was not strictly a gravity-operated aerial tram like a lot of them are, okay? It used a 2-rope Bachelor design, and it took about 6 months to construct. The tram project employed 200 people with a $300,000 construction cost. There are 840 tram ore buckets with a capacity of 700 pounds each. And if it's running all day, it could transport 350 tons of ore to the smelter. There were 304 wooden tram towers, including 16 tension stations. Okay, we talk about our counterweight structure at Park City Mountain Base. I believe the Silver King Consolidated had 3 tension stations. All right? This thing had 16. Okay, so average of 4 tension stations per aerial tram segment. Each segment was its separate individual component. It had its own powerhouse, its own bull wheels, okay, and they transferred all the aerial tram buckets from one segment to another on some steel rail, okay, and it was operators that pushed the cars, okay, once they released from the cable, from the haul rope, they went on a sidetrack, just like you would at an ore bin, and they pushed them down to hook on to the next segment. And then it reclamped, and there was an automatic clamping mechanism, okay? 293,275 feet of track rope and haul rope, steel cables, weighing almost 440,000 pounds were used. And they are still up there, if anyone wants to get some. Okay, 1.25 million board feet of lumber used that was cut locally. Okay, so let's start this journey at the mine. The mine adit is over here. This is the steam plant for all the mine equipment, the air compressor, lighting. It was an electrical plant. So, there was no overhead power lines like we have today. You made your own electricity here. All right, so ore came out on the ore carts, dumped into the ore bin. Ore bin loaded, the tram buckets down here. Over here was a coal storage bin that also transferred coal down to here to be loaded by hand into the tram buckets to take coal to the remaining 3 aerial tram power stations and coal to go to the smelter, okay? And the smelter also had a concentrator, a mill, okay? And that had to be powered by steam. So a lot of coal was loaded on this tram going the other way, or going the same way as the ore was, right? And Sandy found this picture online, also from the Western Mining History group. And this is actually at the tram loading station at the Ferris-Haggarty Mine. And you can see the ore bins over here. Here's the chutes loading the cars. And these guys here are taking them off the haul rope, pushing them around here, getting loaded, and then bringing them, I guess it was coming in this way, loaded, and then going back out and reconnecting to the haul cable, okay? And Power Station 1 is also right next to this facility. I don't know if I have a picture of that, because the old historic photos don't really show that. All right, as mentioned, the tram route was comprised of 4 sections, about 4 miles each. 3 ore transfer stations accommodated the 4 individual sections. In addition to using gravity, 4 wood fuel and steam powerhouses were used to drive the system over the Continental Divide and several ridges. The tram traveled at about 4 miles an hour and also delivered supplies to the mine. So this is the second power station. The mine is over this ridge and the Continental Divide down back here, okay? Tram came down here, then up this hill. Here's another powerhouse. You can see the stacks, okay? And so ore has to be transferred to here into a small ore bin for reloading into the outgoing tram cars. And you see the tower here, and it's going up the hill here. All right. Transfer station number 2, power station number 3 looking west. And please note how tall this structure is. Okay, because you have to bring it in high, dump it, load it, and then send it out. All right? You're using gravity to make these transfers. Here's the stack for the steam powerhouse. Here is a load of wood. So they did use wood quite a bit. I would imagine the smelter had priority on the coal. So depending on how much coal they were receiving monthly, they may sometimes had to use wood. All right, transfer station number 3, power station number 4, and still 4 miles from the smelter. And here we go. We're coming in to the town of Encampment. The tram went right through the middle of town. I mean, that'd be cool, right? You look out your house window and there's a tram going by.
How'd they get through that through zoning?
Well, you know, those nefarious people from the east, they don't do zoning. All right, and here we can see railroad day, the tram going right through here, okay? Everybody's dressed in their finest, big party, and there's a bit of irony here. The railroad was in the process of building a spur from the UP main line, you know, Transcontinental Railroad. And this was railroad day when the railroad finally showed up. The track was completed. They ran an excursion train out with all the dignitaries and newspaper people to celebrate it. And that's what this is. Unfortunately, the mine, the smelter, had recently shut down, with many hoping that it would be temporary. And the railroad was supposed to be in Encampment 2 to 3 years earlier. Okay, a lot of construction delays. So the timing just was not good for the copper mining company. The North American Copper Company also built a copper smelter, concentrator, and smelter. Get that in there. Copper sampler and smelter 1902 shortly before the aerial tram was completed. That was about $700,000, so a little more than double the aerial tram cost. Roasters and blast furnaces were used to generate copper matte based on ore quality, and then converters were used to convert the matte into copper blister or ingots. The smelter processed up to 500 tons of copper per day. And here's a nice photograph of the smelter. Aerial tram comes in up here, okay? See how high that is? And then there's an ore bin here, down here. And then it fed the mill, concentrator over here first, and then it went to the smelter. This is a 4-foot diameter wood stave pipe bringing water from Encampment Creek. They used a lot of water here. And there's another great looking photo. All right, so here's the tram unloading and the bins and the transfer point into the mill, and the smelter is over here. I imagine this is a stack for the steam plant, and this might be off gases from the smelter itself. All right. So, Boston Wyoming Smelter. In May of 1907, the smelter caught fire. I guess I missed that, didn't I? Nah. Right here. March 1906, smelter caught fire, resulting in the suspension of operations for several months. Okay. And then the following year, it caught fire again. Not hard to imagine. I mean, it's fire and brimstone in the smelter, and it's a wood structure. Yeah. And this time around, this damage was more serious and then repaired once more at significant expense. The company was now overcapitalized at $10 million and underinsured. It also had been having difficulty paying creditors and investors. Furthermore, the lack of a railroad meant that daily shipping of 40,000 pounds of copper, 20 tons, by wagons to the Union Pacific main line of Walcott, 90 miles away, was a considerable expense. And as I briefly mentioned, the railroad was just months away from arriving in Encampment and several years behind expectations. So here's a nice picture of the rear end of a mule looking down that lovely road to Walcott. And of course, fire wasn't problematic enough. No railroad's not bad enough. We have to have a panic of 1907. In October of 1907, the price of copper plummeted from 26 cents a pound to 13 cents a pound due to stock manipulation by the Hines brothers of United Copper Stocks in an attempt to corner the market in a short sell scheme that failed, causing a run on the banks related to the Hines brothers, triggering the panic. So my wife and I spent many years in Butte, Montana. We know all about Hines because he was a local copper king. Him, Marcus Daly, and William Clark, they ran the town. And he was an unsavory character. F. Augustus Hines incorporated United Copper in 1902 by combining the Butte, Montana copper interests. His brother, Otto, was a stockbroker in New York City, devised a scheme to support his brother. All right. And this is an actual picture of Wall Street in front of the stock exchange on that October day, 1907. And this is where traders used to do their business outside. They weren't trading inside. No, that was the beginning of the end. Things were already pretty bad for the company, but that was it. In 1908, the mine, tram, and smelter shut down, and several hundred employees were laid off. In 1910, the Penn Wyoming Copper Company was bankrupt. In 1913, mining, concentrating, and smelting equipment was salvaged. Emerson escaped legally unscathed and continued promoting until his passing in 1918. All right. So, could it be a future copper contender? Well, I'd like to think so. My wife Joan thinks I'm a dreamer. I'm a typical prospector, right? There's copper in them hills. All right, in the 1980s, Exxon Minerals conducted an underground sampling program at the mine, yielding these values you can see here. Still very favorable copper. I don't know what kind of sampling program, they took 3 samples and that's statistically insignificant. I don't know. But anyways, they did some work. Resources estimated in the area of the mine were 928,000 tons of copper ore containing 116,000 ounces of gold. Well, at 4,000 an ounce, that's pretty good gold too. In the 1980s, assays of the dump samples indicated. Now this is just going on the waste dump, folks. 3.9% copper and traces of gold and silver. Then they're throwing away good stuff. In the 2000s, Black Range Minerals from Australia drilled 3 core samples. There you go, 3, all containing copper ore. One example contained 5% copper, 1.2% grams per ton gold, and about 6 grams per ton silver. So the exploration work that's been done, albeit limited, does indicate maybe we should do some more exploration, right? I mean, look, anybody watch Landman? Drilling for oil? Come on, man, it can work in mining too. In 2015, the Ferris-Haggarty Mining Company purchased the property outright from this Australian company, but was not able to do anything with it. GDS Enterprises Incorporated picked up the property in 2024 from a delinquent tax sale. All right. And now you can also buy the mansion in Rawlings. Get this property. Ownership and control of the various claims involved in the Ferris-Haggarty site has been disputed over the decades. In some cases, interested parties could not maintain a reasonable business association with the claimants and the landowners. This has contributed to limited exploration and project development, in addition to the permitting and financial challenges of the site. The amount of copper ore remaining in the mine is unknown, but it could be significant. Okay, so Dan Housel, the chief geologist, his nickname is the Gem Hunter. His words here: before you go prospecting, arm yourself with geological information. Truer words have not been said. So here again, this is just the rib of one of the drifts. Okay, so the wall. Look at all this copper in here. Huh? Green, green, green. And these, Dan was one of the people in this group going in and surveying the underground workings just to see what the condition was. This was like 10 years ago. So it's still in surprisingly good shape in there. All right, July of last year. This is where we parked after a 2-hour ride in. And we had to walk from here down to the mine because the road was getting pretty sketchy. All right? So it was a nice day. All right, so here we go. The first order of business before we actually get to the mine site, because we're coming down the mountain, let's switch back to the west and see if we can cut the cables or, encounter the cables laying on the ground. Then we'll know where the tram was. And sure enough, here we go. All right. So, Sandy, I wanted to point out the haul rope and the track rope. Okay. This is the track rope, nice and smooth, so the bogie wheels can roll on it with limited friction. Okay. This is the haul rope right here. See how braided and rough that is? All right. So here's one of the bogie wheels from an ore bucket. Okay. And then here is a metal pad with a shaft on it that had another pulley on it that would engage the bottom of the tram bucket as it crossed the tower. All right. So the cable would roll the cable would roll on that.
So those two cables are crossing Mojave, the bike trail up above.
The King Khan. Yeah. So both cables are still there.
They're still there.
Okay, cool.
It's a little bump to get by.
It's just to let you know that Spiro was once here.
Still here.
Yeah, in spirit. All right, so here, fascinating stuff. This is a tension station at the top of the Continental Divide. So in through the forest here, there weren't trees back in the day, but it starts downslope and it crosses, I don't know, a quarter mile of cirque. That's 300 or 400 feet down. There's no towers for that whole unsupported span. Incredible. So they needed a tension station on this side for sure. They may have had one on the other side too. This tension station is right coming out of the mine, the loading station, maybe, 300 yards up the hill. And it was a huge structure. Here are the boxes that contained all the rocks to provide weight to get the tension. Each of these boxes is about 5 feet high. So that's a 10-foot box. There's 4 of them along this side, okay? And you can't see any of these things from anywhere in the valley or on the ridgeline because all the trees have grown up around there and hiding it. Okay, here's the Osceola tunnel, and it's got a steel door. It's all locked up. But there's a lot of green malachite-based water coming out of here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as bad as you think. If it was orange, that would be not so good. But there's no treatment plant here. There is a monitoring well to monitor the pH. Okay. And then there's some ore carts just to the right or to the left of the tunnel.
Go get 'em.
Yeah. We just got to figure out how to get them up the hill. Midnight ore cart salvage. All right, here is one of the waste dumps. This structure, this pile of wood rubble was the coal bin, okay? This was the ore bin, an aerial tram loading station, and right over here was the power plant to run this leg of the tram, the first leg, okay? There's all kinds of coal debris and ash laying over here, pieces of the boiler and so forth. But, look at how overgrown the hillside is too with alpine fir. All right, here's the remains of the smelter down in Encampment, just concrete walls, okay? There's a big slag dump But again, just it's hard to find stuff compared to what it used to look like. All right, this is the cabin we rented, right along a nice, cold, clear flowing irrigation ditch, and our labradoodles are really enjoying this over here. And I'm having a glass of wine, nursing some sore feet. Okay, one of the many really nice aspects of Encampment is they have a great museum, visitor center. And in front of it, they have a replica aerial tram using the original Ferris-Haggarty buckets and ore carts. So if you go there, you can actually check out exactly how this worked. Okay, so this was the haul rope right here, spring-loaded clamp that connects the tram carrier and bucket to the cable. This is the track rope up here, and these bogies rolled along there, okay? And when the haul rope crossed the tower, it had to have a little bogie there on an axle shaft to allow it to slide over there. The track rope was fixed. It did not move. The haul rope did. The haul rope went around the bull wheel on both ends of the aerial trim, just like our modern chairlifts. And this was basically a replica tower, like the ones that were built for the mine. Some of them were taller than this, but this was about the average size. All right, just want to recognize some of my sources. Obviously, the museum was really helpful, and Western Mining History for photographs. The gem hunter, Dan, he had some great insight on recent geologic work. Articles, the Salt Lake Mining Review, Wyoming History. G.B. Dobson has an excellent write-up online, Wyoming Tales and Trails. He goes into all the mining districts of all of Wyoming. So there's a section in there on Encampment. U.S. Department of Interior and National Park Service, National Register. And of course, the interwebs. Got lots of great pictures. All right, I'll open up for questions if you have any.
Okay. We're going to do the mic. So, want to have a question? Oh, so does that work? Yes. Okay, so if you have a question, I'm just going to pass it around. So here we go.
Being ex-military, I'm always interested in munitions, and I was wondering if the copper was used in any way to help war efforts in getting ammunition ready. Do you know anything like that about it?
Well, in the early 1900s, when this mine was running, late 1890s, the United States was going through the electrification process.
Yeah.
It was huge, getting away from kerosene lanterns and candles. And so the big mines in Butte, Montana, the big mines in Arizona, everybody was putting out as much copper as they could. Okay? Well, when the Panic of '07 happened, only the big boys survived. Anaconda Company survived. Okay? Phelps Dodge survived. Small places like this, if they would have had a railroad, could they maybe have survived? Maybe. All right? They just had so much working against them, being so remote, right? But they had very innovative engineers and managers and investors. They rolled the dice. They had it good for a while, but ultimately it didn't work. I don't know how much ammunition was made back then. I'm sure, the military needed it, the outdoor sporting goods, hunters. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, big shooter, So I'm sure it went into that, but the real driver was the electrification of the country.
Yeah.
Making motors, making switchgear, overhead lines, things like that.
Thank you.
There was a question over here.
Yeah.
How much did the mine sell for in 2014?
We have to do an extensive search on the internet. I did look. I didn't find anything right away. It was for back taxes, so could have been a couple $100,000. The problem is the land has a separate owner compared to the claims. And this is where the latest owner got into disputes with the various claimants. And they couldn't settle things, okay? So unless that gets worked out, it's always going to be a problem. The whole ownership of the mineral rights, the water rights, the surface rights, the ground. And if you can work through all that, and you do some development work, exploration, what have you, have a budget, maybe a couple $1 million, and you get through that, things look really encouraging still, then you got huge environmental hurdles to contend with, all right? And unless our government and our society gets more mining friendly, it's easier just to mine in Central America, South America, China, right? Even Canada is more favorable to mining than the U.S. Could you get the mic there, please? Thank you.
Well, you were talking about the coal, and I was wondering, where did they get the coal? How did they get that in?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I was able to find, which is somewhat limited, so it's 3 miles away towards Bags. Well, we drove through that area, and I'm like, this is all metamorphic igneous rock in the Sierra Madre. There's no coal here. So I'm not saying it didn't come from towards Bags, towards the northwest. I just don't think it was 3 miles away. I think it was further, because you have to get back down to like the plains and the sagebrush country where there's sedimentary rock where the coal would be. But nonetheless, they brought it in by wagon from the west side. And apparently it was more readily available than coming down from Rawlings or, the Rock Springs area down to Saratoga, Walcott, Saratoga. I think once the railroad would have been completed and they had rail service, then it would have been way cheaper just to bring it in on the rail spur. So I think the ownership looked at it as a temporary thing until they could get the railroad down there. Any other questions?
What keeps the town going down?
Aha, good. You know what? Going to places like that. All right, fly fishing. Yeah, tourism. In the wintertime, snowmobiling is very popular here. It's probably, I'm just going to guess here, a majority is tourism, but there's also ranches in the area. And that brings in, some economic amount. About 10 years ago, the sawmill in town shut down, so they did have logging, and that's still there. It's, not running. But I'd say, 60, 70% is tourism. And that can be broke down into fly fishing, hiking, mountain biking in the summer, snowmobiling, snowshoeing in the winter. They have quite a few festivals. The weekend we were there in July, they had a rendezvous with all the mountain men. Okay? And it also brings a lot of craft people out that make knives, that make jewelry, that make leather garments, beadwork. So festivals really help out too, which is part of tourism. Yes.
So thanks for the photo credit on that that one little Orban.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with that Orban because it looks exactly like the one on a claim jumper. Can you flip back there and talk about? It's the same technology, right? It's Bleichert trams.
Whoops, wrong way.
Yeah, that one.
So the claim jumper part of it is like down here.
Yeah, the ore chutes look the same, and I'm imagining a steel rail like that used to run there. The only thing that's left is the ore chutes, right? But it's the same technology.
Yeah, but here's the problem, Sandy. Why you're not ever going to convince me. let's take a look at, where's another picture? Right here, okay? Claim jumper. And I concur with your initial assessment saying it was a coal bin. That's what I believe it is. All right, you see, I keep trying to articulate this. Run-of-mine ore came in through here, okay? There's the ore bin. It probably had a capacity for, I don't know, a couple days supply, okay? So it was pretty good size. And below the ore bin, where you saw those chutes, had to be the tram, which the tram house is down here. So you got to look at the structure, even if we didn't have this protective house on top for the weather. This is 25 or 30 feet high, okay? So when you can explain to me how tram buckets were loaded with the claim jumper ore bin, I'll be all ears, okay? It's a physical impossibility, all right? And in my humble view, the original tram loading station was next to it, which we walked up to with Brian. We looked at the concrete footers and the studs and the cement, okay? It's a massive structure, okay? And if you look at all the transfer points, okay, this is hard to tell here, but it comes in, I mean, this building, even though it's closer to us, is far taller than the tram tower because they had to transfer the ore into buckets below to load the next leg of the tram, okay? You look how tall this sucker is. This thing's massive. There's a ladder leaning up here, okay? There's a horse right here. I mean, these things are big. And the way they're constructed, 12 by 12 timbers, 8-inch thick planks. A lot of times they were lined with sheet steel. You're dumping ore in there that's got a specific gravity of 5 or 6 or 7, okay? Coal has a specific gravity right around 1 or less than 1. It's not nearly as abrasive and damaging to an ore bin. That's why that other structure is really a coal bin. But you can call it whatever you want. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you for your participation. I got you out of here early too.